The day they threw me into the Blood Basin to die, I had no idea I was about to become the most dangerous woman in the pack. If you've ever been cast aside, labeled worthless, or told you'd never amount to anything, stay with me. Because this is the story of Ria Voss, a servant girl with no wolf, no voice, and no future, who rose from execution to claim a throne no one thought she deserved. Watch until the end to see how she turned her death sentence into her coronation. And if this story grabs you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let's go. The cold hit Ria's skin before the words did. She was on her knees in the center of the council hall, wrists bound with iron cuffs that bit into her flesh. The stone floor beneath her was slick with morning dew, and the faint smell of old blood clung to the air like a warning. Around her, the pack elders sat in their high-backed chairs, faces carved from stone and contempt. Dawn light filtered through the narrow windows high above, cutting through the darkness in thin pale shafts that did nothing to warm the room. Ria could hear her own breathing, shallow, uneven, too loud in the oppressive silence. Her knees ached where they pressed against the unforgiving stone, but she didn't dare shift her weight. Any movement, any sound would draw their eyes. And their eyes were already on her, judging, measuring, finding her lacking. Ria Voss, Elder Corwin's voice echoed through the chamber, sharp and brittle as breaking ice. You stand accused of trespassing into the private chambers of our Alpha King without permission or escort. Do you deny this? Ria's throat burned. She wanted to speak, to explain, but the words tangled somewhere between her chest and her mouth. She'd been taught her whole life that her voice didn't matter, that girls like her, servants, omegas without wolves, were meant to be invisible. But now, dragged into the light and accused before the entire council, invisibility wasn't an option. I had permission, she finally whispered. The hall erupted in laughter, not the warm kind, the kind that cut, the kind that reminded her exactly where she stood in the hierarchy of this world. Permission? Elder Marin sneered, her thin lips curling back over yellowed teeth. She leaned forward in her seat, her bony fingers gripping the armrests like talons. From whom? The kitchen mice? You're a servant girl with no lineage, no wolf, and no business anywhere near the Alpha's quarters. Ria's hands trembled. She clenched them into fists, nails digging into her palms hard enough to leave crescents in the skin. The king himself. The king, Corwin interrupted, rising from his seat with deliberate slowness, is not here to defend your lies. And even if he were, do you truly believe he would waste his breath on something like you? Something, not someone. The word landed like a slap, and Ria felt it reverberate through her chest. She'd heard it before, 1,000 times, in 1,000 different ways. The servants whispered it when she passed in the corridors. The warriors muttered it when she brought them water during training. Even the children in the pack knew she was lesser. A mistake of birth, a body without the blessing of the shift. Well, in this world, your wolf was everything. It was your identity, your strength, your proof that you belonged. It was the mark of the gods, the gift that separated pack from prey. And Ria had none. No shift, no connection to the ancient power that ran through every other member of the pack. Just a human body that grew tired, that bruised easily, that would never be fast enough or strong enough to survive in a world built for predators. She was an anomaly, a flaw in the bloodline, worthless. Take her to the Blood Basin, Corwin ordered, his voice flat and final. Let the ancestors decide her worth. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by excited murmurs. Ria's blood ran cold. The Blood Basin. She'd heard the stories. Every child in the pack had. It was the ancient pool deep beneath the council hall, filled with sacred water that had been blessed by the first alphas centuries ago. The water was said to carry the judgment of the ancestors. It would accept the worthy and destroy the weak. No one had survived it in over a century. Those who entered either emerged transformed, blessed with unimaginable power, or they didn't emerge at all. The basin consumed them, dissolved them, erased them from existence as if they'd never been born. It was the ultimate test, and the ultimate execution. Ria's heart slammed against her ribs. No, please, I'm telling the truth. Silence her. A heavy hand clamped over her mouth, cutting off her words. 2 guards hauled her to her feet, their grips like iron around her arms. She kicked, twisted, tried to wrench herself free, but they were warriors, bred for strength, trained for violence. Her struggles were nothing more than an inconvenience. The council members watched with cold satisfaction, their eyes glittering with the kind of cruelty that only came from power unchecked. They'd already decided her fate. This wasn't a trial, it was a spectacle. Elder Marin's smile widened as Ria was dragged past her chair. "Such a shame," the old woman murmured, loud enough for Ria to hear. "You were almost useful in the kitchens." Ria tried to scream, but the hand over her mouth crushed the sound into nothing. She tried to bite, to claw, to do anything, but her body, weak, human, wolfless, was no match for warriors who could tear through stone with their bare hands. The last thing she saw before they pulled her through the doorway was Elder Corwin brushing invisible dust from his robes, already turning to discuss other matters. To them, she was already dead. The descent into the lower halls was a blur of rough stone and flickering torchlight. The guards didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their grip on her arm said everything. She was cargo, not a person, a problem being disposed of. Ria's mind raced, fragments of thought colliding and scattering. She replayed the morning in broken pieces, how she'd been summoned to the king's chambers just after dawn to deliver his breakfast tray, how he'd asked her to stay and organize the books scattered across his desk, how she'd said yes because refusing an Alpha King wasn't an option. He'd told her explicitly that she had his permission to be there. He'd even smiled, a rare, fleeting expression that had startled her so much she'd nearly dropped the stack of books in her arms. But he wasn't here now, and without him, her word meant nothing. The corridor grew colder as they descended. The air changed, became heavier, saturated with something Ria couldn't name. It pressed against her skin like a living thing, making her lungs work harder with each breath. Somewhere ahead she could hear water, not the gentle trickle of a stream, but something deeper, something that sounded almost like breathing. The passage opened into a vast underground chamber, and Ria's breath caught. The room was enormous, easily large enough to hold half the pack. The ceiling disappeared into darkness far above, supported by massive pillars carved directly from the bedrock. Torches lined the walls, their flames casting wild, dancing shadows across the stone. And in the center of it all was the Blood Basin itself. It was larger than she'd imagined. A pool carved directly into the floor, at least 20 feet across and impossibly deep. The water inside glowed faintly crimson under the torchlight, as if it contained fire instead of liquid. Steam rose from its surface in slow, lazy curls, and the smell of iron was overwhelming, thick and metallic and ancient. Around the edges of the basin, symbols had been etched into the stone, runes in a language older than the pack itself. They pulsed faintly, as if alive, synchronized with some heartbeat Ria couldn't hear. Her stomach turned. This was where she was going to die. "Strip her," one of the guards said, his voice echoing off the stone. Rough hands tore at her clothes. Ria fought, clawing, kicking, biting, but it didn't matter. They ripped the fabric away with casual brutality until she stood in nothing but her thin undergarments, shivering in the cold air. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to preserve some scrap of dignity, but even that was taken from her. The crowd had followed. Of course they had. Executions were entertainment here. A reminder of what happened to those who stepped out of line, who forgot their place, who dared to dream above their station. Ria saw their faces in the torchlight, servants she'd worked beside for years, warriors she'd served meals to, even a few children peeking around their parents' legs with wide, curious eyes. No one looked away. No one objected. No one spoke in her defense. She recognized Mira, a kitchen girl she'd considered a friend. Their eyes met for a moment, and Ria saw something flicker across Mira's face. Pity, maybe, or regret. But the girl looked away quickly, disappearing into the crowd. No one would risk themselves for her. Why would they? She was nothing. Elder Corwin stepped forward, holding a ceremonial blade. The metal gleamed in the torchlight, its edge so sharp it seemed to cut the air itself. His voice boomed across the chamber, echoing off the stone. "Ria Voss, you have been judged unworthy by this council. The Blood Basin will confirm what we already know, that you are nothing, that you have no place among us." He raised the blade and sliced a shallow cut across her forearm with practiced precision. Blood welled up immediately, bright and red against her pale skin. It dripped down her arm, pooling briefly at her elbow before falling to the stone floor with soft, rhythmic patters. "Let the ancestors decide," Corwin intoned, his voice taking on the formal cadence of ritual. The guards lifted her by the arms and legs, hoisting her up like a sack of grain. Ria thrashed, her voice breaking into a raw, desperate scream. "No, please, I'm telling the truth. The king gave me permission. He told me to organize his books. Ask him. Please, just ask him." No one answered. They carried her to the edge of the basin. The water below churned lazily, its crimson surface reflecting the torchlight and fragments of broken fire. The steam rising from it was warm against her face, smelling of copper and something else, something old and wild and utterly inhuman. "Wait!" Ria screamed, her voice cracking. "Please, you don't have to do this. Just wait for the king. He'll tell you. They threw her. The world spun. For one weightless moment, she hung in the air, suspended between earth and water, between life and death. In that moment, she saw everything with brutal clarity, the faces watching her die, the elders who'd condemned her without evidence, the pack that had never once seen her as anything more than a convenient target for their cruelty. She saw the life she'd lived, the years spent scrubbing floors, serving meals, keeping her head down and her mouth shut. The night she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering what she'd done to deserve being born different. The morning she'd woken up, hoping today would be the day her wolf finally came, that the gods would finally remember her. They never had, and now she was falling. Then she hit the water. The cold was a shock, but the pain was worse. The basin didn't feel like water. It felt alive, thick and viscous, crawling over her skin like 1,000 insects. It burned where it touched her cuts, seeped into her mouth and nose when she gasped, flooded her lungs with liquid fire. She tried to swim, but the surface was impossibly far away, receding with every frantic kick. Her limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, as if the water itself was dragging her down. Her chest screamed for air, her vision blurred, darkness creeping in from the edges. "This is it," she thought distantly. "This is how I die. Alone, unmourned, forgotten. The girl no one wanted, vanishing into water that would leave no trace of her existence. But then, something else. A pulse. Not from her heart, from the water itself. It started low, a vibration she felt in her bones rather than heard. Then it grew, louder, stronger, faster, until it wasn't just around her. It was inside her. The pain shifted. It stopped burning and started building like pressure behind a dam about to break. Ria's mouth opened in a soundless scream as power, raw, ancient, furious power, flooded into her body. Her veins lit up like lightning beneath her skin. Her bones ached and stretched. Her muscles tore and rebuilt themselves, denser, stronger. Her skin felt too tight, like something massive was trying to claw its way out from inside her. And then she heard it. A voice. Her voice. But not quite. "Wake up." Her wolf. The wolf she'd never had. The wolf everyone said didn't exist. It was there. It had always been there, buried so deep that even she hadn't known. And now the basin, the sacred water that destroyed the unworthy, was dragging it to the surface with brutal, unstoppable force. "Wake up." Ria's eyes snapped open, and they weren't her eyes anymore. They glowed molten gold, bright enough to cut through the crimson darkness of the water. Her wolf roared. Above the water, the crowd had gone silent. The blood basin was reacting in a way it never had before. The water churned violently, whipping into waves that crashed against the stone edges and sent spray across the chamber floor. It glowed brighter and brighter, the crimson light intensifying until the entire room was bathed in red like the inside of a beating heart. The runes carved into the stone flared, burning white-hot, and a low, resonant hum filled the air, like the world itself was holding its breath. "What's happening?" someone whispered, their voice tight with fear. Elder Corwin stepped back from the edge, his face pale. "It's rejecting her. The basin is destroying her completely. I've never seen it react this strongly. The ancestors must be truly offended." He didn't finish. The water exploded upward in a massive geyser that shot toward the ceiling, and Ria rose with it. She stood in the center of the basin, water streaming off her body in sheets, her head tilted back, her eyes blazing with light that had nothing to do with the torches. The air around her shimmered with heat and energy, distorting everything like a heat mirage. Her arms hung at her sides, fingers splayed, and power radiated from her in waves that made the torches flicker and the stone beneath the crowd's feet vibrate. When she opened her mouth, the sound that came out wasn't human. It was a howl, pure, primal, absolute. It echoed through the chamber, through the halls beyond, through the very bones of the mountain itself. It was the sound of something waking after centuries of sleep, something old and vast and utterly dominant. The crowd stumbled backward. Some screamed. Others fell to their knees, hands pressed over their ears, unable to bear the weight of that sound. Ria's body shifted, not fully into wolf form, but enough. Her nails lengthened into claws, black and gleaming and sharp enough to tear through steel. Her teeth sharpened into fangs, her muscles coiled with strength that hadn't been there moments before, visible beneath her skin like steel cables. And her presence, the sheer weight of it, pressed down on everyone in the room like a physical force. It was the presence of an apex predator, something that sat at the top of the food chain and knew it. She wasn't an omega. She wasn't even an alpha. She was something the pack had forgotten existed, something from the old stories before the bloodlines were diluted and the power scattered. A trueborn. The Basin had recognized her, claimed her, crowned her, and now the pack that had tried to kill her could do nothing but stare. Ria's glowing eyes swept over them slowly. The elders who'd condemned her, the guards who'd thrown her, the crowd who'd watched. Her gaze lingered on each face, memorizing them. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and steady and absolutely terrifying. "You tried to erase me." The chamber shook, dust fell from the ceiling. The water in the basin began to drain, spiraling downward into some unseen depth with a sound like a scream, leaving her standing on bare, wet stone. "You called me worthless, unworthy, nothing." She stepped forward, and the crowd parted like she was made of fire. No one wanted to be close to her. No one dared. But the ancestors have spoken. Another step. Water dripped from her hair, her skin, pooling at her feet. And they chose me. Elder Corwin opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His carefully constructed authority, his decades of power and influence crumbled in the face of something he couldn't understand, couldn't control, couldn't explain away. Elder Marin had gone white as death, her thin body trembling. The guards who'd thrown Ria into the basin were on their knees, heads bowed, unable to meet her eyes. Ria didn't stop walking. She climbed out of the basin, dripping wet, head high, every inch of her radiating a power that made the torches flicker and the shadows twist. Her feet left wet prints on the stone. Her breathing was steady. Her hands didn't shake. For the first time in her life, Ria Voss was not afraid. And that's when she felt it. A pull. Not from the water. Not from the runes, or the chamber, or the crowd. From somewhere else. Somewhere deeper. Somewhere that bypassed her mind entirely and spoke directly to her soul. Her wolf stirred, restless and alert, and for the first time in her life, Ria understood what the bond felt like. The mate bond. He was coming. The Alpha King. Her other half. The doors to the chamber slammed open with a force that rattled the iron hinges and sent echoes crashing through the stone halls. Kyle Draven strode in like a storm-given form. He was tall, over 6.5 feet, with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway, and a presence that made the air itself feel heavier. His dark hair was still messy from sleep, falling across his forehead in a way that should have made him look disheveled, but somehow only made him look more dangerous. His gray eyes were sharp as broken glass, scanning the room with the kind of focus that missed nothing. He wore no crown, no ceremonial robes, no symbols of office. He didn't need them. Authority radiated from him the way heat radiated from flame. Natural, undeniable, absolute. The crowd dropped to their knees instantly. All of them. All except Ria. She stood there, soaked and glowing, water still dripping from her hair, and met his gaze without flinching. Kale stopped mid-stride. His eyes widened just slightly, the only sign of surprise he allowed himself. His nostrils flared as he scented the air, and Ria saw his entire body go rigid. The bond snapped into place. It hit them both at the same time, a recognition so deep and primal that it bypassed thought entirely. It was instinct. DNA. destiny. Every cell in their bodies screaming that this was it, this was the one, this was home. Ria gasped, her hand flying to her chest as if she could physically hold the feeling inside. It was overwhelming, like being struck by lightning and embraced at the same time. Kael's expression shifted from surprise to something far more dangerous. Hunger, possession, certainty. His wolf had found its mate, and she was standing in a room full of people who'd tried to kill her. Who, he said, his voice lethally quiet, authorized an execution in my absence? The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Kael's gaze swept over the elders, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I asked a question. Still nothing. Kael took a slow step forward, and several people flinched. I will ask one more time. Who authorized this? Elder Corwin finally found his voice, though it came out strangled. My king, we acted in accordance with pack law. The girl trespassed into your private chambers without permission, The girl, Kael interrupted, his voice cutting like a blade through flesh, had my explicit permission to be in my chambers. Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. She was there on my orders, to organize my library, a task I assigned her personally before I retired last night. Corwin's face went white, then gray, then a sickly shade somewhere between the two. I told her she could return this morning to finish the work, Kael continued, each word deliberate and precise. I told her to enter whenever she liked, that the guards would be informed of her access. Did any of you bother to confirm this before dragging her before the council at dawn? No one answered. Kael's jaw tightened. Did any of you think to wake me and ask? Still nothing. You condemned an innocent woman to death, without trial, without evidence, without my knowledge, without my consent. Kael's voice was soft now, which somehow made it worse, soft the way a blade was soft against skin right before it cut. You threw her into the Blood Basin for the crime of obeying her king. Elder Marin tried to speak, her voice a thin rasp. We didn't know she was telling the truth. She's just a servant, and what? Kael's eyes locked on her. And therefore her word is worthless? And therefore her life is forfeit? Is that what you were going to say, Elder? Marin's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Kael turned and his eyes found Ria again. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The bond thrummed between them, alive and insistent and impossibly strong. Ria felt her wolf rise to meet his, not in submission, but in recognition. Equal to equal, mate to mate. Kael's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. It was darker than that, more possessive. You survived the basin. I did. Ria's voice came out stronger than she expected. Do you know what that means? Ria's chin lifted. She felt her wolf surge forward, lending her courage she'd never had before. It means they were wrong about me. Kael's smile widened, and this time it was real, dangerous and proud and absolutely feral. It means, he said softly, that you're mine. The bond flared between them like wildfire, and Ria's breath caught. She felt it in her chest, in her bones, in the marrow of her being, the certainty that she belonged to him, and he belonged to her, that they were two halves of something that had always been meant to be whole. Kael looked back at the council, and his expression went cold again. Ice over steel. She has my protection, my authority, and my mark. He gestured toward Ria without taking his eyes off the elders. From this moment forward, any order she gives carries the same weight as my own. Anyone who disobeys her disobeys me. Anyone who harms her harms me. Is that understood? Panic flickered across the elders' faces. But, Marin started. Kneel, Kael commanded. The word was absolute. It carried the full weight of his alpha authority, the power that made wolves submit whether they wanted to or not. One by one, the elders dropped to their knees. The guards followed. Then the crowd. All of them kneeling, to her. Ria stood there, dripping and trembling and fierce, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. She was inevitable. Kael stepped closer, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. He stopped just in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the scent of pine and smoke that clung to his skin. His voice dropped so only she could hear. What do you want to do with them? Ria looked past him at the elders, at Corwin, who'd ordered her death without a second thought, at Marin, who'd mocked her pain and laughed at her terror, and felt her wolf stir with a hunger for vengeance. It would be easy. So easy. One word from her and Kael would destroy them. She could see it in his eyes, feel it in the tension of his body. He was waiting for her command, ready to unleash violence on anyone who dared hurt what was his. But vengeance wasn't justice, and Ria had spent too many years powerless to waste this moment on simple revenge. She wanted them to understand, to feel, to know exactly what they'd done to her, done to countless others like her. Strip them of their titles, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. Take their robes, their authority, their seats on the council. Let them serve as I served. Let them scrub floors and haul water and bow their heads to those they once commanded. Someone in the crowd inhaled sharply. Let them know what it feels like, Ria continued, to be nothing. Kael's eyes gleamed with approval. Something dark and satisfied flickered across his face. It will be done. He turned to face the council, his voice ringing out with absolute authority. You heard her. Effective immediately, you are stripped of rank and title. You will serve in the kitchens, the stables, the laundries, wherever you are assigned. You will bow to those you once ruled, and you will do so with gratitude that my mate has shown you more mercy than you showed her. Corwin's face twisted. You can't. I am your king, Kael said quietly. I can do anything I want. And right now, I want you to understand the cost of your arrogance. He paused. Be grateful she didn't ask for your heads. I would have given them to her. The threat hung in the air, sharp and real. Marin began to weep, ugly, gasping sobs that echoed off the stone. Kael ignored her. He turned back to Ria, and his expression softened just slightly. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. His touch was gentle, almost reverent. You're freezing, he murmured. Ria hadn't noticed. The adrenaline, the power still humming through her veins, had kept the cold at bay. But now that he mentioned it, she realized she was shivering. Kael shrugged off his cloak, heavy black wool lined with fur, and draped it around her shoulders. It was warm, and it smelled like him. Safe. Come, he said softly. We're leaving. He offered her his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Ria took it. Together they walked out of the chamber. Behind them, the pack remained kneeling. And in that moment, everything changed. The girl they'd thrown away had become their queen. And there was no going back. The walk through the halls felt endless. Ria was acutely aware of every eye that followed them. Servants pressing themselves against the walls, warriors pausing mid-step to stare, children peeking around corners with wide, frightened faces. News traveled fast in the pack. By now, everyone knew what had happened in the Blood Basin. The girl with no wolf had survived. More than survived. She'd been chosen. And now she walked beside the king, wrapped in his cloak, her hand resting on his arm like she belonged there. Kael's chambers were in the eastern tower, far from the main halls where most of the pack lived and worked. The climb up the spiral staircase made Ria's legs burn. Her body was still adjusting to the power that had flooded into her, and exhaustion was starting to creep in at the edges. She stumbled on one of the steps, and Kael's hand shot out instantly, steadying her. Easy, he murmured. We're almost there. Ria nodded, not trusting her voice. The bond hummed between them, warm and insistent, and she could feel his concern like it was her own emotion. It was disorienting, knowing what he felt, sensing his thoughts brushing against hers, even though neither of them had spoken. They reached a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron. Kael pushed it open and guided her inside. The room was larger than any space Ria had ever occupied. High ceilings, stone walls lined with bookshelves, a massive fireplace already crackling with flames. Through the tall windows, she could see the forest stretching out below, disappearing into mist. Sit, Kael said, gesturing toward a chair near the fire. Ria sat, pulling his cloak tighter around herself. Now that the adrenaline was fading, the cold was hitting her hard. Her teeth chattered despite the warmth of the room. Kael disappeared through a side door and returned moments later with a stack of clothes, soft wool pants, a tunic, thick socks. He set them on the chair beside her. Change, he said. I'll turn around. He did, facing the window, and Ria quickly stripped out of her wet undergarments and pulled on the dry clothes. They were far too big. The pants had to be rolled at the ankles, the tunic hung nearly to her knees, but they were warm and they smelled like him. "Okay," she said quietly. Kael turned back, and something flickered in his eyes when he saw her wearing his clothes. Satisfaction, maybe. Possessiveness. The bond pulsed between them, stronger now. He knelt in front of the fire and added another log, then turned to look at her fully. "How do you feel?" Ria considered the question. How did she feel? Her body ached in ways she'd never experienced, like her bones had been broken and reset, her muscles torn and rebuilt. But underneath the pain was something else. Strength, raw, untapped power that hummed just beneath her skin. "Different," she finally said. "Everything feels sharper, louder. I can hear people moving 3 floors down. I can smell—" She stopped, frowning. "I can smell fear from the guards outside your door." Kael's mouth curved slightly. "They're afraid of you, as they should be. I don't understand what happened, what I am now." Kael pulled a chair over and sat facing her, elbows resting on his knees. The Blood Basin doesn't just test worthiness. It awakens what's already inside you, if you're strong enough to survive the process. Most people aren't. Their bodies can't handle the power, and the basin consumes them. But mine could, yes. His gray eyes held hers, which means your wolf was always there, Ria, just dormant, buried so deep that even you couldn't sense it. Why? I don't know. Sometimes it happens, especially in bloodlines that have been diluted over generations. The wolf goes to sleep, waiting for the right catalyst to wake it. He paused. The basin was that catalyst. Ria's hands trembled slightly. I felt it. Inside the water. It was like drowning and being born at the same time. That's exactly what it was. Kael leaned back. You died down there. The human part of you that was weak, that couldn't shift. And you were reborn as what you were always meant to be. And what's that? Kael's expression turned serious. A trueborn. It's rare. Maybe 1 in 1,000 generations. You're not just an alpha, Ria. You're something older, stronger. Your wolf carries the bloodline of the first pack, before the power was scattered and weakened. The word settled over her like a weight. Trueborn. She'd heard the term in stories, legends whispered around fires late at night. Wolves so powerful they could command entire packs with a word, bend others to their will, fight a dozen warriors single-handedly. She'd thought they were myths. The pack won't accept this, she said quietly. They won't accept me. They don't have a choice. They'll fight it. You saw their faces. They're terrified, but they're also angry. I was nothing this morning, a servant, and now you're my mate, Kael interrupted, and my equal. Anyone who challenges you challenges me. Ria met his eyes. You can't fight the entire pack for me. Watch me. The certainty in his voice should have been comforting, but it wasn't, because Ria knew what happened to packs when the leadership became divided. She'd seen it before, years ago, when a challenge for Alpha had split the Northern Territory into factions. The fighting had lasted months. Dozens had died. She didn't want that. Not because of her. There has to be another way, she said. There is. Kael stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. You prove yourself. You show them you're not just powerful, you're worthy of that power. How? He turned to look at her. By leading. By making decisions they can't argue with. By being better than they ever expected. He paused. Starting today. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kael's expression hardened. Enter. The door opened and a man stepped inside. Tall, muscular, with scars crossing his arms and a warrior's stance. Ria recognized him. Dane, the captain of the king's guard. My king, Dane said, bowing slightly. Then his eyes shifted to Ria, and something complicated flickered across his face. Not quite hostility, but not acceptance either. My lady. The title felt wrong in his mouth, like he was forcing it out. What is it? Kael asked. The council is requesting an audience. They want to discuss recent events. Tell them I'm busy? With respect, Your Majesty, they're insisting. Elder Torven is threatening to call an emergency assembly if you don't meet with them. Kale's jaw tightened. Torvin? He's rallying support among the senior warriors, saying the pack needs clarity on what happened this morning. On her. Dane's eyes flicked to Ria again. Ria felt something cold settle in her stomach. Torvin. One of the few elders who hadn't been in the chamber during her execution, which meant he still had power, still had influence, and he was already moving against her. Kale was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Fine. Tell them I'll meet with the council in 1 hour, in the main hall. Dane bowed and left. The door clicked shut and Kale turned to Ria. This is it, your first test. What do I do? You stand with me. You don't back down. You don't apologize. And you sure as hell don't let them see you afraid. He crossed the room and stood in front of her. Can you do that? Ria thought about the Blood Basin, about drowning and coming back stronger, about the power that still hummed in her veins, wild and untamed but hers. Yes, she said. Kale smiled. Good, because they're going to try to tear you apart, and I need you to show them why that's a mistake. The main hall was packed. Word had spread fast, and it seemed like half the pack had crammed themselves inside to witness whatever was about to happen. Warriors lined the walls, arms crossed, expressions grim. Servants huddled in corners, whispering behind their hands. Even children were there, perched on their parents' shoulders to see over the crowd. At the far end of the hall, the remaining council members sat in their chairs. 8 of them now, instead of 12. Corwin, Marin, and 2 others were conspicuously absent, already stripped of rank and reassigned. In the center seat sat Elder Torvin. He was older than the others, probably in his 70s, with white hair and a face carved by decades of authority. Unlike Corwin, who'd ruled through cruelty, Torvin ruled through respect. He was a warrior in his youth, had led the pack through 2 territory wars, and had earned his place on the council through blood and strategy, which made him far more dangerous than Corwin had ever been. Ria walked into the hall beside Kyle, and the noise died instantly. Every eye turned to her. She'd changed into proper clothes, leather pants, a fitted tunic, boots that actually fit. Kyle had insisted. You're not a servant anymore, he'd said. Dress like a queen. But even in new clothes, Ria felt exposed, judged. The weight of all those stares pressed down on her like physical force. Her wolf stirred, restless and aggressive, urging her to meet their eyes and make them look away first. She did. One by one, she met the gazes of the people watching her, warriors, servants, council members, and held them until they looked away. It was instinct, dominance, the kind of challenge alphas issued to establish hierarchy. By the time she reached the front of the hall, several people had dropped to one knee. Torvin hadn't moved. He sat in his chair, hands folded calmly in his lap, watching her with eyes that missed nothing. Kale stopped in front of the council, Ria at his side. You called for this meeting, Torvin. Speak. Torvin rose slowly. My king, thank you for coming. His voice was measured, calm. Recent events have created confusion within the pack, confusion that needs to be addressed. There's no confusion, Kyle said flatly. I've made my position clear. With respect, Your Majesty, you've made a claim, but the pack needs more than your word. We need proof. Proof of what? That she, Torvin gestured toward Ria, is truly your mate, that she's worthy of the authority you've granted her, that she's not simply a convenient tool to consolidate your power. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ria felt her jaw tighten. Tool, like she was an object Kael was using. Be very careful with your next words, Torvin, Kael said quietly. I mean no disrespect, but you must understand, half the pack watched her thrown into the Blood Basin as a servant girl this morning, and now she stands here as your declared mate and equal. The transition is abrupt. People have questions. Then let them ask. Torvin inclined his head. Very well. First question. Has the mate bond been confirmed, publicly? Kael's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that bonds can be faked, claimed without evidence. If you truly believe she's your mate, prove it. Let the pack witness the marking. The hall went silent. Ria's heart slammed against her ribs. Marking. She knew what that meant. It was the final step of the mate bond. When an alpha bit their mate's throat, leaving a permanent scar that broadcast the bond to everyone. It was intimate, possessive, irreversible, and Torvin wanted them to do it in front of the entire pack. "You're asking me to perform a sacred ritual as entertainment?" Kale's voice was dangerously soft. "I'm asking you to prove your claim. If the bond is real, the marking will succeed. If it's not," Torvin shrugged, "then we have a different problem." Ria could feel Kael's anger through the bond, hot and sharp and barely controlled, but underneath it was something else. Hesitation. Because marking her now, in front of everyone, would tie her to him permanently. There would be no going back, no escaping the bond if she decided she didn't want this. He was giving her a choice. Ria turned to look at him. Their eyes met, and she saw the question there. "Do you want this?" Did she? She'd known Kael for less than a day. Everything had happened so fast, the execution, the awakening, the bond snapping into place. She barely knew him beyond the stories she'd heard, the glimpses she'd caught when serving in his halls. But the bond didn't lie. She could feel it, solid and real and undeniable. This was her mate, her other half, the person she was meant to stand beside. And more than that, she was tired of being powerless. If marking her in front of the pack was what it took to silence the doubters, to claim her place, then so be it. "Do it," she said quietly, so only Kael could hear. His eyes widened slightly. "Ria, do it," she repeated, louder this time, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Mark me. Prove the bond. Let them see." The hall erupted in whispers. Kael stared at her for a long moment, searching her face. Then slowly, he nodded. He turned to Torvin. "You want proof? Fine. You'll have it." He moved so fast, Ria barely had time to react. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he was behind her, one arm wrapped around her waist, the other tilting her head to the side to expose her throat. His breath was warm against her skin. "This is going to hurt," he murmured, so quiet only she could hear. "I know. And once it's done, there's no undoing it. You'll be mine, and I'll be yours, forever." "I know," she said again. She felt him smile against her neck. Then his teeth sank into her skin. The pain was immediate and intense, like being branded with hot iron. Ria gasped, her hands flying up to grip Kael's arm, nails digging into his skin. Her wolf surged forward, meeting his, and the bond exploded between them. It was overwhelming. She could feel everything he felt, his possessiveness, his pride, his absolute certainty that she was his. And underneath it all, something softer, something that felt almost like reverence. The mark burned itself into her skin, permanent and undeniable. When Kael finally pulled back, Ria's knees buckled. He caught her easily, holding her against his chest. "Done," he said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "The bond is sealed. She is mine, and I am hers. Anyone who challenges this challenges the laws written in our blood." He turned her around so the crowd could see the mark on her throat, a perfect impression of his teeth, already beginning to scar over with the faint glow that marked a true bond. Gasps echoed through the hall. Torvin stared, his expression unreadable. "Is that proof enough?" Kael asked coldly. Torvin was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed his head. "The bond is confirmed. She is your mate." But he didn't kneel. And Ria noticed that several of the warriors along the walls didn't kneel either. Acceptance wasn't the same as respect. "However," Torvin continued, straightening, "the matter of her authority remains. You've declared her your equal, that she holds the same rank and power as you. But rank must be earned, Your Majesty, not given." "She survived the Blood Basin," Kael said sharply. "That's proof enough. That's proof of strength, not leadership, not wisdom, not the ability to command." Torvin's eyes shifted to Ria. "No offense intended, my lady. But yesterday you were a servant. Today you claim to be a queen. The pack needs to see that you can actually lead." Ria felt her wolf bristle. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "A trial. A test of your capability. If you pass, the pack will accept your authority. If you fail," he shrugged, "then perhaps your role should be reconsidered." "This is ridiculous," Kael started. "I'll do it," Ria interrupted. Kael turned to her, eyes wide. "What?" "I'll do it," she repeated louder. She looked at Torvin. "What's the test?" Torvin's expression didn't change, but she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or surprise that she hadn't backed down. Tomorrow, the northern hunting party is scheduled to depart. 3 days in the mountains, tracking game for the winter stores. It's dangerous. Wolves, bears, unpredictable weather. Traditionally, only experienced warriors go. He paused. Lead them. Bring back enough game to feed the pack for a week. Do that, and I'll support your claim to authority. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several warriors exchanged glances. Ria's mind raced. She'd never hunted in her life. Didn't know the mountains, didn't know how to track, didn't know how to lead warriors who probably resented her. But she also knew that backing down now would destroy any credibility she had. Fine, she said. I'll lead the hunting party. Torvin smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Excellent. The party leaves at dawn. I'm sure Captain Dane can provide you with the necessary supplies. Kael's hand tightened on her arm. Through the bond, she could feel his frustration, his anger at Torvin for manipulating the situation, but there was nothing either of them could do. The challenge had been issued and accepted in front of the entire pack. The meeting is adjourned, Kael said coldly. Everyone out. The crowd began to disperse, but Ria noticed that several warriors lingered, whispering among themselves and casting glances her way. They weren't looks of support. Once the hall was mostly empty, Kael turned to her. You didn't have to accept. Yes, I did. If I'd refused, they would have seen it as weakness. Proof that I can't lead. You don't know how to hunt. Then I'll learn. Ria met his eyes. You said I needed to prove myself. This is how. Kael was silent for a moment, then he sighed. You're stubborn. You're just figuring that out? Despite everything, he smiled. Come on. If you're doing this, we need to prepare. So, they spent the rest of the day in brutal preparation. Kael brought in the best hunters, the most experienced trackers, and made them teach Ria everything they could cram into a few hours. How to read tracks, how to move silently through the forest, how to identify game trails, how to kill cleanly. Her wolf helped. The instincts were there, buried deep, and they rose to the surface when she needed them. But instinct wasn't the same as experience. By nightfall, Ria's head was spinning with information, and her body ached from the physical training. Kael had insisted she practice shifting. Her wolf form was massive, silver-white, with eyes that glowed like molten gold, but controlling it was harder than she'd expected. The power was intoxicating, and her wolf wanted to run, to hunt, to fight. Restraining it took effort. You'll get better with practice, Kael said as they walked back to his chambers. It takes time to learn control. I don't have time. I leave at dawn. I know. They reached his door and Kael paused. You should sleep. You'll need your strength. Ria nodded, but she didn't move. The mark on her throat still burned faintly, a constant reminder of the bond between them. Kael? Yes? Why did you mark me in front of everyone? You didn't have to do that. He turned to look at her fully. Because they needed to see that I'm serious. That this isn't political maneuvering or a temporary arrangement. You're my mate, Ria. That's not something I take lightly. Even though you barely know me? The bond doesn't lie. I know you well enough. He reached out and brushed his thumb across the mark on her throat, and Ria shivered at the contact. And I know you're stronger than you think you are. You're going to prove it tomorrow. What if I fail? You won't. But if I do, then we'll deal with it together. His hand cupped her face. You're not alone anymore, Ria. Remember that. The bond pulsed between them, warm and reassuring, and for the first time since the Blood Basin, Ria felt some of the fear ease. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. Dawn came too fast. Ria stood at the edge of the forest, supplies strapped to her back, watching as the hunting party assembled. There were 8 of them, all warriors, all experienced, all looking at her with varying degrees of skepticism. Captain Dane was among them, his expression carefully neutral. Ready? He asked. Ria nodded, not trusting her voice. Kael was there too, standing off to the side with his arms crossed. He'd wanted to come with her, but Torvin had forbidden it. This was her test, not his. Their eyes met across the clearing, and through the bond she felt his confidence in her, his certainty. It helped. Move out, Dane ordered. The party shifted into wolf form and disappeared into the trees. Ria took a breath, let her own wolf surge forward, and followed. The hunt had begun, and 3 days from now she'd either return a queen or not return at all. The mountains were different in wolf form. Ria's senses exploded with information she'd never had access to before. Every scent trail painting pictures in her mind, every sound sharp enough to pinpoint location and distance, every movement in the undergrowth telegraphing exactly what kind of creature made it. The world was no longer flat and simple. It was layered, complex, alive in ways her human senses had never been able to capture. But knowing how to interpret all that information was something else entirely. The hunting party moved through the forest in practiced formation, Dane at the front, the others spread out in a loose V pattern that covered maximum ground while maintaining visual contact. Ria stayed near the center trying to mimic their movements, but her wolf was too big, too clumsy, crashing through undergrowth that the others slipped past like shadows. After the first hour, Dane dropped back to run beside her. "You're making too much noise," he said, his voice coming through the pack link, the mental connection that allowed shifted wolves to communicate without sound. "Every animal in a mile radius knows we're here." "I'm trying," Ria shot back, frustration bleeding into her thoughts. "Try harder, or we'll starve before we get close to anything worth killing." He surged forward again, leaving her alone. The other warriors didn't speak to her through the link, didn't offer advice or encouragement. They just kept moving, clearly annoyed that they'd been saddled with an inexperienced alpha who was slowing them down. Ria pushed harder, forcing her wolf to move more carefully, to think before placing each paw. It helped. A little. But by the time they stopped at midday to rest and shift back to human form, she was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Leading was harder than she'd thought. They made camp in a small clearing near a stream. The warriors spread out, some gathering firewood, others checking their gear. Ria stood awkwardly to the side, unsure what to do. Dane approached, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk strategy." "Okay. The elk herds migrate through the northern ridge this time of year. If we push hard, we can reach their territory by tomorrow evening. That's our best chance for a clean kill. Multiple targets, good meat yield." Ria nodded, trying to look like she understood. "How many can we take down?" "Depends. If we coordinate properly, maybe 3 or 4, enough to meet Torvin's requirement." He paused. "But there's a problem." "What problem?" "The ridge borders the unmarked territory. Rogue wolves use it as hunting grounds. They don't take kindly to pack wolves encroaching." One of the other warriors, a lean man named Soren, with scars across his jaw, laughed harshly. "Don't take kindly? Last party that went up there lost 2 warriors. Rogues ambushed them, tore them apart for sport." Ria's stomach tightened. "When was this?" 6 months ago, Dane said. "Since then, we've avoided the ridge, hunted in safer territories." "But those territories are picked clean this late in the season," another warrior added, a woman named Kira with sharp eyes and sharper teeth. "If we want to meet the quota, the ridge is our only real option." Ria looked between them. "So what are you saying?" Dane met her eyes. "I'm saying you need to decide. Safe hunting that might not yield enough game, or risky hunting that could get us all killed. Your call. You're the one leading this." It was a test. Another one. They were waiting to see if she'd make the safe choice and fail to bring back enough meat, or the dangerous choice and potentially lose warriors. Either way, she'd be blamed. Ria's jaw tightened. "We go to the ridge." Soren's eyebrows shot up. "You're serious?" "Yes, we're here to bring back game for the pack. That's what we'll do." "Even if it means walking into rogue territory?" "We'll be careful, post sentries, watch each other's backs." She looked at Dane. "You said the ambush happened 6 months ago. How many rogues were there?" 4 that we know of, could be more now. "And how many of us are there?" 8. "Then we have numbers on our side. We stay together, stay alert, and we finish this." Ria's voice was steadier than she felt. "Unless anyone has a better idea?" Silence. Finally, Kira nodded slowly. "All right, the ridge it is." The others exchanged glances but didn't argue. They started packing up camp, movements efficient and quick. Dane lingered, studying Ria with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You know Torvin was hoping you'd fail this, right? That's why he structured it this way. Impossible timeline, dangerous territory, inexperienced leader. He's betting you'll either come back empty-handed or not come back at all." I know. And you're doing it anyway? I don't have a choice. Not if I want them to respect me. She met his eyes. Do you think I'm making the wrong call? Dane was quiet for a long moment. I think you're braver than you are smart, but sometimes that's what a pack needs. He turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, the king chose well. You've got the spine for this, even if you don't have the experience yet. It wasn't quite approval, but it was close. Ria took it as a win. Totkan. They reached the ridge by late afternoon the next day. The landscape changed as they climbed, trees growing sparse and twisted, undergrowth giving way to rocky terrain that cut at their paws. The air was thinner up here, colder, carrying scents that made Ria's wolf uneasy. Blood, old and new, bone, death. We're close, Dane said through the link. Everyone stay sharp. They crested the ridge and found themselves looking down into a wide valley. Below, moving in a tight cluster, was a herd of elk, at least 20 strong, their antlers catching the fading sunlight like crowns. Ria's wolf surged with hunger. This was what they'd come for. We split into 2 groups, Dane said. Flank them from both sides, drive them toward the center where the rest of us will be waiting. Quick kills, no wasted movement. Understood? A chorus of acknowledgement echoed through the link. Ria, you're with me in the center group. Soren, Kira, take 3 others and circle left. We'll circle right. On my mark. They moved into position, silent as ghosts. Ria's heart pounded as she crouched behind a boulder, watching the elk graze below. Her inexperience was a liability here. One wrong move and she'd spook the herd, ruin everything. Don't mess this up, she told herself. Don't now! Both flanking groups exploded from cover, charging down the slope with terrifying speed. The elk scattered instantly, panicking, running in every direction, but Dane had planned well. The terrain funneled most of them directly toward the center, where Ria and the others waited. Take them down, Dane roared. Ria launched herself at the nearest elk, her wolf's instincts taking over. She hit it mid-stride, jaws closing around its throat, and the animal went down hard. Blood flooded her mouth, hot, metallic, intoxicating. Her wolf wanted to tear, to feast, to revel in the kill. But there was no time. She released the dead elk and turned to find her next target. Around her, the other warriors were bringing down animals with brutal efficiency. Coordinated strikes, clean kills, no wasted effort. Within minutes, it was over. 6 elk lay dead in the valley, more than enough to meet Torvin's requirement. Ria shifted back to human form, chest heaving, hands covered in blood. We did it. Dane shifted as well, grinning, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Not bad for your first hunt. The others were celebrating too, clasping shoulders, laughing with the relief of a successful mission. Even Soren looked grudgingly impressed. For the first time since this whole thing started, Ria felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she could actually... A howl cut through the air. Not one of theirs, everyone froze. The howl came again, closer this time, answered by another from the opposite direction. Then another, and another. They were surrounded. Rogues, Dane hissed. Shift, now. Ria's wolf surged forward, but before she could fully transform, shapes exploded from the tree line. Massive wolves with matted fur and wild eyes, moving with the coordinated precision of a trained pack. There weren't 4. There were at least 12. Defensive formation, Dane shouted, but it was too late. The rogues hit them like an avalanche. Ria barely had time to register what was happening before a rogue slammed into her side, sending her sprawling. She rolled, came up snarling, and met her attacker head-on, jaws snapping, claws tearing. The rogue was fast, experienced, and absolutely vicious. But Ria was stronger. She felt her trueborn power surge, and suddenly the fight shifted. She caught the rogue by the throat and threw it, 15 feet into a boulder. It hit with a sickening crunch and didn't get up. Around her, the others were fighting for their lives. Dane was holding off 2 rogues at once, bleeding from a dozen wounds but refusing to go down. Kira had killed one but was cornered by 3 more. Soren was on the ground, throat torn open, eyes staring at nothing, dead. Rage exploded through Ria. These weren't just rogues. This was an organized assault. They'd been waiting, watching, planning. This was a trap. Fall back, she roared through the link. To the ridge. Now. But the rogues had cut off their escape route. They were being herded away from the high ground, pushed toward the valley floor where they'd have no advantage. Ria made a split-second decision. Dane, get everyone to the rocky outcrop at 6 o'clock. I'll draw them off. What? No, you can't. That's an order. Before he could argue, Ria charged directly at the largest group of rogues, 5 of them, all focused on cornering Kira. Ria hit them like a battering ram, her trueborn strength scattering them like leaves. Run! She screamed at Kira. Kira didn't need to be told twice. She bolted toward the outcrop where the others were regrouping. The rogues turned their attention to Ria. All of them. She ran, not toward the outcrop. That would just bring the rogues down on her entire party. Instead, she ran perpendicular, leading them away, buying time for her warriors to reach defensive positions. Her wolf was faster than the rogues, but not by much. She could hear them behind her, closing the gap, their snarls echoing off the rocks. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. She couldn't keep this up. The ground dropped away suddenly, and Ria found herself skidding toward the edge of a cliff. She tried to stop, but momentum carried her over. She fell. It wasn't a long drop, maybe 20 feet, but she hit hard, slamming into the rocky ground below with enough force to knock the air from her lungs. Pain exploded through her ribs. Above, the rogues appeared at the cliff edge, staring down at her. For a moment, Ria thought they'd jump after her. Then a new sound cut through the air, a deep, resonant howl that made every hair on Ria's body stand on end. The rogues scattered instantly, disappearing into the forest like they'd never been there. Ria lay on the ground, gasping, trying to figure out what just happened. Footsteps approached, human footsteps. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Ria's blood went cold. It was a woman, tall and lean, with silver hair despite appearing no older than 30. She wore leather armor and moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent their entire life fighting. But it was her eyes that made Ria's wolf whimper. They were the same molten gold as Ria's. Trueborn. Well, the woman said, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. This is interesting. Ria tried to shift back to human form, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Too much pain, too much damage. The woman crouched down, studying Ria like she was a particularly fascinating puzzle. You're the one everyone's talking about. The servant girl who survived the Blood Basin and became the king's mate. She smiled, and it wasn't kind. My name is Vera, and I'm afraid I have some bad news for you. Who? Ria managed to gasp out through the pack link. I'm your sister. The words hit Ria like a physical blow. Impossible, Ria said. I don't have family. I was found as a child, no parents, no memory of where you came from, Vera finished. Yes, I know. That's because our mother erased them, scattered us across different territories to protect us from the people who wanted us dead. She stood. But now you've gone and made yourself visible, powerful, important, and that's put a target on both our backs. I don't understand. Those rogues? They weren't random. They were sent to kill you, to eliminate the last of our bloodline before we can reclaim what was stolen from us. Vera's expression hardened. Our mother was the rightful queen of this entire region, not just one pack, but all of them. She was murdered 15 years ago by the Council of Alphas who wanted to divide her territory among themselves. Ria's mind reeled. That's impossible. Kyle would have told me. Kyle doesn't know. No one does. The council buried the truth, rewrote history, made sure no one would ever question their authority. Vera extended a hand toward Ria. But you surviving the Blood Basin changed everything. You're proof that our mother's bloodline still exists, and now they're terrified. Who's they? The same people who ordered those rogues to attack you. The same people who are probably already moving against your precious mate and his pack. Vera's eyes gleamed. Which means you have a choice to make, little sister. You can go back to playing queen in a kingdom built on lies, or you can come with me and learn the truth about who you really are. Above them, Ria could hear her hunting party calling for her through the link, Dane's voice, frantic, Kira shouting her name. They thought she was dead. Vera smiled. Better decide quickly, because either way, a war is coming, and you need to figure out which side you're on. Ria's ribs screamed as she forced herself to stand. Blood dripped from a dozen wounds. Her wolf wanted to collapse, to accept help, to stop fighting. But Ria had learned something in the Blood Basin. She didn't break. I don't know if you're telling the truth, Ria said, her voice steady despite the pain. "But I know I'm not abandoning my pack." "Your pack?" Vera repeated, something dangerous flickering in her eyes. "The same pack that threw you into the Blood Basin to die? That called you worthless? That's still testing you, even now, waiting for you to fail? They're my responsibility now." "How noble!" Vera's tone turned mocking. "And when the assassins come for Kael? When the council decides he's too dangerous to live because he bonded with forbidden bloodline? What then?" Ria's heart stuttered. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that by marking you, Kael signed his own death warrant. The council can't allow a trueborn to have that kind of power. They'll move against him within the week." Vera stepped closer. "Unless you move first, I'm not starting a war." "The war already started, Ria. 15 years ago. You just didn't know you were part of it." Vera pulled something from her pocket, a small carved pendant in the shape of a wolf. "This belonged to our mother. I've kept it all these years waiting for the right time to find you." She tossed it to Ria, who caught it instinctively. The moment the pendant touched her skin, memories flooded in. Not her own, but someone else's. A woman with silver hair and golden eyes, holding 2 small children, singing to them, promising to keep them safe. Then blood, fire, screaming, the woman being torn apart by wolves wearing council insignia. Ria gasped, dropping the pendant like it was burning her. "You see it now, don't you?" Vera said quietly. "The truth your mind was protecting you from. Mother died trying to save us, and the people who killed her are the same ones sitting in council chambers, making decisions about your future." "Torvin," Ria whispered, the pieces clicking into place. "He was part of it. He led it, along with 4 other alphas who wanted to carve up Mother's territory." Vera's voice turned cold. "And now he's testing you, pushing you into danger, hoping you'll die so he doesn't have to explain to Kael why he needs to eliminate his own mate." Above them, the voices were getting closer. They'd found the cliff. "Make your choice," Vera said. "Come with me, and I'll teach you how to survive what's coming, how to use your power, how to fight, how to win, or go back to them and die trying to earn the approval of people who will never see you as anything but a threat." Ria's mind raced. Everything Vera said made a horrible kind of sense. The way Torvin had structured this hunt, the convenient ambush, the impossible standards. But Kael trusted her, believed in her, and the bond didn't lie. "I'm going back," Ria said finally, "but I'm not done with you. I need proof, real proof, that what you're saying is true." Vera smiled. "You'll get it, sooner than you think." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. The king you're so loyal to? Ask him about the Clearwater massacre. See if he tells you the truth." Then she was gone, disappeared into the shadows like she'd never been there. Moments later, Dane appeared at the top of the cliff, eyes wild. "Ria, thank the gods, we thought—" He stopped, taking in her injuries. "What happened? Where are the rogues?" "Gone," Ria said, forcing herself to shift back to human form despite the agony. "They retreated." "Why?" "I don't know." It was a lie. The first one she'd told since the bond formed. And through the link, hundreds of miles away, she felt Kael stir, sensing something was wrong but unable to pinpoint what. Dane climbed down to help her, and within minutes the rest of the party had joined them. They were battered, exhausted, and down one warrior, but alive. "We need to get back," Kira said. "Soren's body needs to be returned to his family." Ria nodded. "Gather the kills, we're leaving." As they prepared to depart, Ria's hand closed around the pendant in her pocket. She had a lot of questions, and she was starting to suspect that the answers would destroy everything she thought she knew. The journey back took 2 days instead of 1. They had to move slowly, carrying both Soren's body and the elk carcasses, and Ria's injuries made shifting painful. Every breath felt like broken glass scraping against her lungs. Dane had wrapped her ribs with strips torn from his own shirt, but it only helped so much. She refused to let anyone carry her. The hunting party moved in silence, the triumph of their successful hunt overshadowed by the loss of one of their own. Soren had family waiting, a mate, 2 young children who would grow up without their father, and it was Ria's call that had put them in rogue territory, her decision that had gotten him killed. The guilt sat heavy in her chest, heavier than the pain from her ribs. Through the bond, she could feel Kael's growing concern, He kept reaching out, trying to understand why she felt so fractured, so conflicted. She pushed back gently, not ready to explain, not ready to voice the questions Vera had planted in her mind. Ask him about the Clearwater Massacre. What did that mean? And why did the name send a chill down her spine even though she'd never heard it before? They reached the pack territory at dusk on the second day. Word of their return must have spread fast because half the pack was waiting at the gates. Warriors, servants, elders, all watching as the hunting party emerged from the forest. Ria shifted back to human form, ignoring the stares, ignoring the way people whispered when they saw her injuries. She walked straight toward the council hall where she knew Torvin would be waiting. The crowd parted for her. Kael was there too, standing at the entrance, his face carved from stone. The moment he saw her, bloody, limping, but alive, something broke in his expression. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "You're hurt," he said, his voice rough. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding through your bandages. That's not fine." Through the bond, Ria felt the storm of emotions inside him. Relief, fury, fear, pride, all tangled together so tightly she couldn't separate one from the other. "I need to report to Torvin first," she said quietly. "Then we'll deal with the rest." Kael's jaw tightened, but he nodded and released her. He stayed close as she walked into the hall, though, a silent statement that she wasn't facing this alone. Torvin sat in his chair, flanked by the remaining council members. His expression was carefully neutral, but Ria caught the flicker of surprise in his eyes when he saw her walking. He'd expected her to come back in a coffin, or not come back at all. "Lady Ria," Torvin said, inclining his head. "Welcome back. I trust the hunt was successful?" 6 elk, Ria said flatly. "More than enough to meet your requirement. They're being processed now." Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. "Impressive," Torvin said, "although I see you paid a price for that success." "We lost a warrior. Soren died defending the kill from rogues." The murmurs grew louder. Several warriors in the crowd shifted uneasily. Torvin leaned forward. "Rogues? In the northern ridge?" "Yes, at least a dozen of them. They were organized, coordinated. It wasn't a random attack." Ria met his eyes. "It was an ambush." "An ambush," Torvin repeated slowly. "Are you suggesting someone sent them after you?" "I'm suggesting it's suspicious that we encountered that many rogues in territory you claim was safe enough for a hunting party." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Torvin's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Are you accusing me of something, Lady Ria?" "I'm stating facts. You sent us into dangerous territory with impossible quotas and no backup. A warrior died because of it." Ria's voice was steady, despite the pain screaming through her ribs. "So either you're incompetent or you were hoping we wouldn't come back." Gasps echoed through the hall. Kael moved closer to Ria, his presence a wall of support at her back. Torvin rose slowly from his chair. "That is a serious accusation. Then prove me wrong. Explain why you didn't warn us about the rogues. Explain why you structured this hunt the way you did." Ria took a step forward. "Or admit that this was never about testing my leadership. It was about getting rid of me." The silence that followed was absolute. Torvin stared at her for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. "You're right." More gasps. Even Kael went rigid beside her. "I did structure the hunt to be nearly impossible," Torvin continued. "I did send you into dangerous territory. And yes, I hoped you would fail." He stepped down from the council platform, moving with the careful precision of a man who'd fought 1,000 battles. "Do you know why?" "Because you're afraid of me. Because I needed to know if you were strong enough to survive what's coming." Torvin stopped a few feet away from her. "This pack has enemies, Lady Ria, powerful ones. And when they learn that the king has bonded with a trueborn, with someone who carries the old bloodline, they will come for us. All of us." Ria's heart stuttered. He knew. Somehow Torvin knew what she was. "I needed to see if you would break under pressure," Torvin said. "If you would run when things got hard. If you were worthy of the power you've been given." He paused. "And you didn't break. You made hard choices. You protected your warriors. You brought back the kill even after being ambushed. That tells me you might actually survive what's coming." "And Soren?" Ria's voice cracked. Was his death part of the test too? Torvin's expression softened just slightly. No. That was a tragedy I did not anticipate. And I am sorry for it. But war always has casualties. And if you're going to lead this pack alongside the king, you need to accept that not everyone will survive. Ria felt sick. This isn't war. Not yet, but it will be. Torvin looked past her to Kyle. Tell her. Tell her what you've been keeping from her. Kyle's hand found Ria's shoulder. Through the bond, she felt his reluctance, his anger at being forced into this conversation publicly. Tell me what? Ria asked, turning to face him. Kyle's jaw worked. There's been movement on the eastern borders, scouts from the council territories. They've been watching us for weeks. What council? The Council of Five. They're the alphas who control the surrounding territories. The ones who divided the region among themselves 15 years ago after... He stopped, clearly unwilling to continue. After what? Ria pressed, even though she already knew the answer. Vera's words echoed in her mind. After they murdered your mother. Kale met her eyes. After the Clearwater massacre. The pendant in Ria's pocket seemed to burn against her skin. What was the Clearwater massacre? She asked, even though part of her didn't want to know. A battle. A queen tried to unite all the territories under single rule. She was powerful, a trueborn, like you. She could have done it too, forced everyone to submit through sheer dominance. Kale's voice was careful, measured. But the regional alphas saw her as a threat. They formed an alliance, cornered her at Clearwater Valley, and killed her entire family, every last one. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because it happened 15 years ago, ancient history. I didn't think it was relevant. And now? Now the council knows you exist. They know a trueborn survived, and they're terrified that history is about to repeat itself. Kale's hand tightened on her shoulder. Torvin's right. War is coming. The only question is whether we're ready for it. Ria's mind raced. Every piece was falling into place. Vera's story, the ambush, Torvin's test, the scouts on the borders. This wasn't just about her proving herself to the pack. This was about survival. How long do we have? She asked. Days, maybe a week, Torvin said. They'll send a delegation first, asking the king to surrender you, to hand you over for execution. And when he refuses, then they'll come with armies. The hall erupted in noise, warriors shouting questions, elders demanding order, servants crying out in fear. Ria stood in the center of it all, feeling the weight of every eye on her. This was her fault, her existence, her power, her refusal to stay invisible. It had brought war to the pack's doorstep. She could leave, walk away right now, disappear into the wilderness the way Vera had, remove herself from the equation and let the pack survive without her. But even as the thought formed, she knew it was impossible. The bond wouldn't let her. And more than that, she was tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of letting other people decide her worth. Ria turned to face the crowd, and her wolf surged forward, lending her the presence she needed. Listen to me! Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The hall went silent. I know you didn't ask for this. I know most of you still see me as the servant girl who couldn't shift. But that's not who I am anymore. The Blood Basin made me something else, something stronger. She gestured to the warriors who'd returned with her from the hunt. Ask them. Ask Dane and Kira and the others what happened in those mountains. Ask them if I ran when the rogues attacked. Ask them if I abandoned them. Dane stepped forward. She saved us, he said clearly. Drew the rogues away while we regrouped, nearly died doing it. If she hadn't... He stopped, his voice rough. We'd all be dead. Not just Soren. Kira nodded. She's inexperienced, clumsy, doesn't know half of what she should. The brutal honesty made several people wince. But she's got courage, and she doesn't quit. That counts for something. Other warriors murmured agreement. Ria felt something shift in the room. Not complete acceptance, not yet. But the beginning of respect. The Council of Five is coming, Ria continued, and they want me dead because they're afraid of what I represent. But I'm not the one who should scare them. She looked at Kyle, then back at the crowd. You should, because this pack survived the Clearwater massacre. You rebuilt after other packs tried to tear you apart. You've endured wars and winters and losses that would have destroyed weaker territories. She paused, letting her words sink in. The council thinks you'll hand me over to save yourselves, that you'll choose peace over loyalty. Are they right? Silence. Then a voice called out from the back of the hall, an old warrior with gray in his hair and scars covering his arms. The king chose you. That's good enough for me. Another voice joined in. We don't bow to outsiders. Then another. Let them come. We'll be ready. One by one, warriors began stepping forward, pledging their support. Not all of them. Ria could see faces in the crowd that still held doubt, still held resentment, but enough. Enough to make a difference. Torvin watched it all with an expression that might have been satisfaction. When the noise finally died down, he spoke. I formally withdraw my objection to Lady Ria's authority. She has proven herself worthy through action, not just bloodline. He bowed his head to her, a gesture of respect from an elder to an alpha. I will support her claim. The other council members exchanged glances, then followed suit, bowing one by one. It wasn't complete victory, but it was a start. Kale pulled Ria against his side, and through the bond she felt his relief, his pride, his absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. We need to prepare, he said to the room. Fortify the borders, recall our scouts, stock supplies. If the council is coming, we meet them ready. The crowd began to disperse, warriors organizing into groups, making plans. The energy had shifted from fear to determination. Ria felt it too, the resolve hardening in her chest. War was coming, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't running from the fight. She was ready for it. As the hall emptied, Torvin approached her one last time. You're going to need allies, he said quietly. The Council of Five is powerful. We can't fight them alone. What are you suggesting? There are other pacts. Smaller territories that have been pushed around by the Council for years. If someone offered them a chance to fight back, someone powerful enough to actually win, they might join us. Ria understood what he wasn't saying. You want me to unite them, like the Queen tried to do 15 years ago. The difference is, you have something she didn't. You have legitimacy through your bond with Kael. You're not trying to conquer, you're trying to survive. That's a message other pacts will respond to. Torvin's eyes were sharp. But you'll need to move fast. The council won't wait. How do I find these other pacts? I can send messengers. Call for a gathering. But you'll need to convince them yourself. He paused. And you'll need to do it before the council arrives. How long? 3 days, maybe 4. It wasn't enough time, but it was what they had. Do it, Ria said. Send the messengers. Torvin nodded and left. Ria turned to Kael, who'd been watching the exchange with a mixture of concern and pride. You know this is dangerous, he said. Gathering that many alphas in one place. Any one of them could betray us to the council. I know, but we don't have a choice. Ria touched the mark on her throat. His mark. If we're going to survive this, we need numbers. We need allies willing to fight. And if they refuse, then we fight anyway. Kale studied her face for a long moment. Then he smiled, sharp and fierce, and absolutely feral. You're really starting to sound like a queen. I'm starting to feel like one, too. He kissed her then, hard and possessive, and through the bond Ria felt everything he couldn't put into words. His fear for her safety, his certainty that they would win, his absolute refusal to let anyone take her from him. When they finally broke apart, Ria was breathless. We should get your ribs looked at, Kael said, his voice rough. Later. First, I need to do something. She pulled the pendant from her pocket, the one Vera had given her. In the torchlight, it gleamed silver and old, the carved wolf catching the flames. Kael's expression shifted. Where did you get that? Someone gave it to me, in the mountains. Ria met his eyes. Someone who claims to be my sister. Kael went very still. What? Her name is Vera. She says she's the daughter of the queen who died at Clearwater, that I'm her sister, that our mother scattered us to keep us safe. Ria's fingers closed around the pendant. Is it possible? Could I be? The queen's daughter, Kael finished, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, it's possible. More than possible. He took the pendant from her hand, examining it closely. This is authentic. I've seen drawings of the queen's personal sigil. This matches. So Vera was telling the truth. About this, at least. Kael handed the pendant back. But that doesn't mean you can trust her. If she's been hiding for 15 years, there's a reason. And her showing up now, right when the council is moving against us, that's not coincidence. She warned me about the council, said they'd come for you because you bonded with forbidden bloodline. Then she knows more than she's telling you. Kael's eyes were serious. Be careful, Ria. Family doesn't always mean ally, especially when power is involved. Ria nodded, tucking the pendant back into her pocket. I know, but if there's even a chance she can help us, we'll deal with her when the time comes. Right now, we have more immediate problems. Kael took her hand. Come on, let's get you to the healer before you collapse. They walked through the halls together, and Ria noticed the way people moved aside for her now. Not out of fear, though there was some of that, but out of respect. She'd earned it. In blood and pain and impossible choices, she'd proven she belonged here. The healer's chambers were warm and smelled of herbs. An elderly woman named Marta took one look at Ria's ribs and immediately began fussing, muttering about foolish young alphas who didn't know when to rest. As Marta worked, rewrapping the bandages properly and applying salves that burned but helped, Ria let herself finally relax. The hunt was over. She'd succeeded. She'd brought back the game, earned the warrior's respect, and gained Torvin's support. But the real fight was just beginning. Through the window, she could see the forest stretching out into darkness. Somewhere out there, the Council of Five was planning their attack. And somewhere else, Vera was watching, waiting for the right moment to make her move. Too many enemies, too many unknowns. But Ria wasn't the powerless servant girl anymore. She was a trueborn, a queen in everything but name. And she was done being afraid. All finished, Marta said, tying off the last bandage. You'll be sore for a few days, but nothing's broken that won't heal. Try not to do anything stupid for at least a week. I'll do my best, Ria said, though they both knew it was a lie. Kael helped her stand and they walked back to his chambers in comfortable silence. The bond hummed between them, warm and steady and reassuring. When they reached his door, Kael paused. You know you don't have to do this alone, right? He said quietly. Whatever happens with the council, with Vera, with any of it, we face it together. I know. And you know that no matter what anyone says, no matter who challenges you or doubts you, you are my mate, my equal, my queen. That doesn't change. Ria felt something tight in her chest finally loosen. I know that too. He pulled her close, careful of her injuries, and pressed his forehead against hers. Then we're going to be fine. Because anyone stupid enough to come for you has to go through me first. And I don't lose. Ria laughed despite everything. That's very alpha of you. I have my moments. They went inside together, and for the first time since the Blood Basin, Ria felt like she could breathe. The war was coming, but she was ready, and she wasn't fighting alone. The gathering was set for 3 days later, and the pack worked around the clock to prepare. Warriors reinforced the borders, scouts mapped escape routes, and servants stockpiled food and supplies in case of siege. The main courtyard was cleared and set up with tables and chairs for the visiting alphas. 12 territories had responded to Torvin's messengers, agreeing to hear what Ria had to say. 12 chances to build an alliance, or 12 ways this could go catastrophically wrong. Ria spent those 3 days learning everything she could about the territories and their leaders. Torvin provided detailed briefings. Who had old grudges with whom, which alphas were ambitious, which were cautious, which could be swayed by logic, and which only respected strength. The key is Elder Cassia from the Western Ridge, Torvin said on the second night, pointing to a name on the map. She's respected, neutral, and commands 3 smaller territories through alliance. If you can convince her, the others will follow. And if I can't, then this whole thing falls apart before it begins. Torvin's expression was grim. Cassia lost her mate and 2 sons to the council during a border dispute 5 years ago. She has every reason to hate them, but she's also pragmatic. She won't risk her remaining people for a fight she doesn't think we can win. So I need to convince her we can win. You need to convince her you're worth dying for. The weight of that statement settled over Ria like a heavy cloak. Worth dying for. She'd spent her entire life being told she was worth nothing. And now she was supposed to inspire people to lay down their lives for a cause that started with her existence. Through the bond, she felt Kael's steady presence, always there, always confident. He believed she could do this. believed it so completely that sometimes Ria could almost believe it too. Almost. The night before the gathering, she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept churning through scenarios, speeches, possibilities. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Soren's body being carried back to his family, heard his mate's screams when they told her he wasn't coming home. That was the cost of her decisions. And tomorrow, she'd be asking others to pay that same price. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Kyle, and walked to the window. The moon was nearly full, painting the forest in silver light. Can't sleep either? Ria spun around. Kyle was sitting up, watching her with those gray eyes that saw too much. I thought you were asleep. The bond doesn't sleep. I can feel when you're restless. He patted the bed beside him. Come here. She climbed back in, and he pulled her against his chest, one arm wrapped protectively around her waist. Talk to me, he said quietly. What if I fail tomorrow? What if they don't believe me, don't follow me, don't... They will. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because I've seen you face down a council that wanted you dead. I've seen you survive the Blood Basin. I've seen you lead warriors into battle and make impossible choices without hesitation. His lips brushed against her temple. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Soren died because of me. Soren died because rogues attacked. That's not the same thing. I gave the order to go to the ridge. And you brought 6 warriors back alive. You could have frozen, could have panicked, could have gotten everyone killed. But you didn't. You acted like a leader. Kale's voice was firm. You can't control everything, Ria. People die in war. But you honor them by making sure their sacrifice meant something. Ria was quiet for a long moment. What if I'm not ready for this? No one's ever ready. You just do it anyway. He shifted so he could look at her face. Tomorrow, those alphas are going to walk in here expecting to see a scared girl playing at being queen. Don't give them that. Show them what I see, a trueborn who refused to die, who fought her way up from nothing, who has more courage in her smallest finger than most warriors have in their entire bodies. That's a lot of pressure. You can handle it. Through the bond, Ria felt his absolute certainty. It steadied her, gave her something solid to hold on to when everything else felt like quicksand. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For believing in me when no one else did. When I didn't believe in myself. Kale kissed her properly then, slow and deep and full of promises. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he smiled. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we change everything. This time, wrapped in his arms with the bond humming between them, Ria slept. The alphas began arriving at noon. They came in small groups, flanked by their warriors, eyes sharp and assessing as they took in the pack's defenses. Ria watched from the tower window as each delegation was greeted by Torvin and escorted to the courtyard. She recognized Elder Cassia immediately. A tall woman with iron-gray hair and a scar running from her left eye to her jaw. She moved like a warrior despite her age, and her eyes missed nothing. That's her, Kale said, standing beside Ria. She's the one you need to win over. No pressure. You've got this. Ria wasn't so sure, but she squared her shoulders and headed downstairs. The courtyard had been transformed into a council chamber of sorts. Tables arranged in a circle with the visiting alphas seated in order of territory size. Kyle's throne had been placed at the north point, and beside it, a second chair. For her, equal to the king. The symbolism wasn't subtle. As Ria and Kale entered, every alpha rose to their feet, a gesture of respect for a ruling pair. But Ria could see the calculation in their eyes, the questions they weren't asking out loud. Who is she really? Can she be trusted? Is she worth the risk? Kale took his seat, and Ria took hers. The assembled alphas sat as well, and for a moment, nobody spoke. Then Elder Cassia leaned forward. I'll be blunt, she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. We all know why we're here. The Council of Five has made threats. They want the trueborn dead, and they're willing to go through anyone who stands in their way. Her eyes locked on Ria. The question is, why should we stand in their way? What do we gain by making ourselves targets? Ria had prepared for this, had rehearsed her answer a dozen different ways. But standing there, looking at 12 battle-hardened alphas who'd survived horrors she couldn't imagine, all her practiced speeches felt hollow. So instead, she told the truth. You gain nothing, Ria said simply. In fact, you'll probably lose people. Warriors will die. Your territories might be damaged. The council will make you pay for opposing them. It bullshit. She paused. But if you walk away now, if you let them dictate who lives and who dies based on bloodline alone, then they've already won, and they'll keep winning. Every time a trueborn emerges, every time someone with real power threatens their control, they'll crush them. And all of you will spend the rest of your lives bowing to alphas who rule through fear instead of strength. Murmurs rippled through the assembled leaders. The Council of Five murdered my mother 15 years ago at Clearwater, Ria continued, her voice steady. They killed her not because she was a tyrant, not because she'd harmed anyone, but because she was powerful enough to unite the territories without their permission. They saw that as a threat, so they destroyed her and everyone she loved, and they've spent the last 15 years making sure no one ever challenges them again. She stood, and every eye in the courtyard tracked the movement. I'm not asking you to fight for me. I'm asking you to fight for yourselves, for your children, for a future where power isn't hoarded by 5 old men who decide your fates from a distance. Ria's hands clenched into fists. The council wants me dead because they're afraid. Not of me specifically. They're afraid of what I represent. Choice, change. The possibility that things don't have to be the way they've always been. Elder Cassia's expression was unreadable. Pretty words, but words don't win wars. You're right, they don't. Ria met her eyes. So let me show you something instead. Before anyone could react, Ria shifted. Her wolf erupted from her skin in a cascade of power that made the air itself vibrate. She was massive, easily twice the size of a normal alpha, with silver-white fur that seemed to glow in the afternoon light. Her eyes burned molten gold, and the sheer presence radiating from her made several of the visiting warriors stumble backward. This was what the Blood Basin had made her. This was trueborn power. Ria prowled forward, and the assembled alphas instinctively leaned back. She stopped in front of Elder Cassia's table and shifted back to human form, not caring that she was naked, not caring about the shocked expressions. The council is afraid of this, Ria said quietly. Afraid that if others see what's possible, they might start questioning the order of things. They want you to believe that power like mine is dangerous, that it needs to be controlled. She smiled, sharp and dangerous. They're right to be afraid. Because I'm not interested in control. I'm interested in justice. Cassia stood slowly, studying Ria with those sharp eyes. And what does justice look like to you? It looks like territories that govern themselves instead of answering to distant masters. It looks like alphas who earn their positions through strength and wisdom instead of inheriting them through bloodlines. It looks like a world where a servant girl can become a queen because she survived something that should have killed her. Ria's voice dropped. It looks like making the council pay for every life they've taken, every family they've destroyed. The courtyard was absolutely silent. Then Cassia did something unexpected. She laughed. It was a rough, rusty sound, like she hadn't used it in years. But it was genuine. You've got fire, girl. I'll give you that. Cassia glanced at Kael. Your mate always this intense? Always, Kael said, a hint of pride in his voice. Cassia turned back to Ria. The council killed my mate, killed my sons, left me with nothing but anger and a territory full of people depending on me to keep them safe. Her scarred face was hard. I've spent 5 years being careful, being smart, avoiding fights I couldn't win. And you know what? I'm tired of it. Tired of bowing my head, tired of pretending those bastards have any right to tell me how to run my territory. She extended her hand to Ria. You want to make them pay? I'm in. My warriors are yours. Relief flooded through Ria as she clasped Cassia's hand. One down. Another alpha stood, a younger man with burn scars covering half his face. The Riverlands stand with you. Then another, and another. One by one, the alphas pledged their support. Not all of them. 3 territories remained seated, their leaders exchanging uncertain glances. But 9 out of 12 was more than Ria had dared hope for. It was enough. As the pledges finished, a commotion erupted at the courtyard entrance. Warriors were shouting, and through the chaos, Ria heard a familiar voice. Let me through. I need to speak with her. Now. Vera. She strode into the courtyard like she owned it, her silver hair catching the light, flanked by a dozen warriors Ria didn't recognize. Every alpha in the room tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Kael rose from his throne, eyes narrowed. Who the hell are you? I'm her sister, Vera said simply, pointing at Ria. "And I'm here to tell you that you're all walking into a trap." The courtyard erupted in noise. Ria held up a hand and, surprisingly, everyone quieted. "Explain, now." Vera's expression was grim. "The council isn't coming with armies. They're coming with assassins. They've hired the Shadowfangs, the best killers in the region. Their target isn't the pack, it's you, Ria, and Kyle. They're planning to cut off the head and watch the body collapse." "How do you know this?" Kale demanded. "Because I've been tracking the council's movements for 15 years. I've made it my life's work to destroy them for what they did to our mother." Vera's eyes found Ria's. "I didn't come to the mountains by accident. I knew you'd be there. I knew the council would make a move once they learned about you, and I knew you'd need help." "Then why wait until now to tell us?" Ria asked. "Because I needed to know if you were worth saving, if you'd run like a coward or stand and fight." Vera smiled slightly. "You chose to fight, so here I am." Elder Cassia stood again. "If what you're saying is true, we need to change tactics. Defense won't work against assassins. We need to go on offense." "Agreed," Vera said, "which is why I brought friends." She gestured, and her warriors parted to reveal a group of rough-looking wolves emerging from the forest. Rogues, Ria realized. The same ones from the mountain ambush. "You controlled them," Ria said, pieces clicking into place. "The attack was a test." "Of sorts. I needed to see how you'd react under pressure, whether you'd protect your people or save yourself." Vera's expression softened slightly. "You chose your people. That told me everything I needed to know." Ria didn't know whether to be furious or grateful. She settled for suspicious. "What's your play here, Vera?" "My play is to finish what our mother started. Unite the territories, crush the council, and make sure no one ever has the power to do what they did to our family." Vera stepped closer. "But I can't do it alone. I need you. Your power, your bond with the king, your ability to inspire people." She paused. "And you need me. My knowledge, my warriors, my experience." "You're asking us to trust you," Kale said flatly. "I'm asking you to be smart. The Shadowfangs are already here. They'll strike within hours. Either we work together and survive, or we fight separately and die." Vera looked around the courtyard at the assembled alphas. "Your choice." Ria turned to Kyle, and through the bond, she felt his conflicted emotions. Vera was dangerous, unpredictable, and possibly lying about everything. But she was also right about one thing. They needed every advantage they could get. "What's the plan?" Ria asked. Vera's smile was sharp as a blade. "We give them a target they can't resist, and when they strike, we're ready." The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Vera's intelligence was disturbingly detailed. She knew the Shadowfang's methods, their preferred approaches, their timing. According to her, they'd strike at dusk, when shadows were longest and visibility poorest. The plan was simple, but risky. Ria and Kyle would act as bait, making themselves visible in the main hall. The visiting alphas and their warriors would hide in the surrounding buildings, ready to spring the trap when the assassins revealed themselves. "They'll come through the windows," Vera said, pointing at the detailed map she'd drawn. 3 teams of 2, fast, coordinated, lethal. Their goal is to kill both of you before anyone can react." "And if this doesn't work?" Cassia asked. "Then we're all dead anyway, so it won't matter much." Not exactly reassuring, but honest. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Ria and Kyle took their positions in the main hall. The room had been cleared of furniture except for 2 chairs positioned near the center, clearly visible from every window. Perfect targets. Ria could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the bond, Kyle's presence steadied her, but he was tense too. This was a gamble that could cost them everything. "If this goes wrong," Ria started. "It won't," Kyle interrupted. "But if it does, I want you to run. Shift and run as fast as you can. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you." Ria, no. "We're in this together. That's what the bond means." She gripped his hand. "If we die standing side by side." Kale's expression softened. "You're really stubborn, you know that?" "You're just figuring that out?" Despite everything, he laughed. Then the windows exploded inward. 6 figures in black burst through in perfect synchronization, moving with inhuman speed. Shadow fangs. Ria caught a glimpse of masked faces, weapons gleaming, then chaos. But Vera had been right about their approach. Warriors erupted from every door and shadow, catching the assassins mid-strike. The hall transformed into a battlefield in seconds. Snarls and screams, the clash of metal on claws, blood spraying across stone. Ria shifted instantly, her wolf surging forward to meet the nearest assassin. He was fast, spinning away from her strike and countering with a blade aimed at her throat. She was faster. Her jaws closed around his wrist, crushing bone. The blade clattered to the floor, and before he could scream, she ripped his throat out. One down. Kael was fighting two at once, his massive black wolf a blur of motion and fury. He killed one with brutal efficiency, but the second managed to score a deep cut across his shoulder. Ria lunged, hitting the assassin from behind and bearing him to the ground. Together, she and Kael tore him apart. Around them, the battle was turning. The Shadowfangs were skilled, but they'd been expecting an easy kill. Instead, they'd walked into an ambush with warriors who'd been ready and waiting. Within minutes, all 6 assassins were dead. The hall fell silent except for heavy breathing and the drip of blood on stone. Ria shifted back to human form, checking Kael's injury. It was deep, but not fatal. Already healing. "Everyone alive?" she called out. A chorus of affirmatives echoed back. Some injuries, but no deaths. They'd won. Vera emerged from the shadows, wiping blood from a blade. "That was almost too easy." "You think there are more?" Kael asked sharply. "I think that was the first wave. The council will have a backup plan." Vera's expression was grim. "They always do." As if summoned by her words, horns sounded from the borders. Multiple horns, from every direction. Warriors poured into the hall, their faces pale. "Armies!" one gasped. "Council armies, surrounding us on all sides." This was it. The real attack. The assassins had been a distraction. Ria's mind raced. They were surrounded, outnumbered, with no way out. Every strategic advantage they'd had evaporated in an instant. She looked at the assembled alphas, at Cassia, at the younger leaders who'd pledged their support, at Kyle standing bloodied but unbowed beside her. They'd come here trusting that she could lead them, that she was worth following. Now she had to prove it. "How many?" she asked the scout. "At least 500, maybe more. They've blocked every exit." 500 against their combined forces of maybe 150. Terrible odds, but not impossible. "We don't run," Ria said clearly. "We don't surrender. We fight." "That's suicide," one of the younger alphas protested. "Maybe, but I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees." Ria looked around the room. "The council thinks we're weak, divided, that we'll crumble under pressure. Let's show them they're wrong." Cassia stepped forward. "What's the plan?" Ria's wolf stirred, and suddenly she knew exactly what to do. "We use the terrain. Channel them into the valley where they can't use their numbers against us. Set traps, create choke points, make them fight on our terms." She turned to Vera. "You know their tactics. Where are they weakest?" "Their left flank. Newer recruits, less experienced." Vera's eyes gleamed. "If we hit them hard and fast there, we might break their formation. Then that's what we do. Cassia, take your warriors and half of ours. Hit the left flank, create chaos. Vera, you're with her." Ria looked at Kael. "We'll hold the center with the rest, draw their main force in and make them pay for every inch." It wasn't a great plan. It probably wouldn't work, but it was all they had. As the warriors dispersed to their positions, Kael pulled Ria aside. "This is insane," he said quietly. "I know. We're going to lose people, a lot of people. I know that too." Ria met his eyes. "But if we don't fight, we lose everything. At least this way, we have a chance." Kael was quiet for a moment. Then he kissed her, hard and desperate, and full of everything they might never get to say. "When this is over," he murmured against her lips, "remind me to tell you that you're the most terrifying woman I've ever met. When this is over, I'll hold you to that." They shifted together and led their warriors into battle. The fighting was brutal. The council's armies were well-trained and disciplined, advancing in tight formations that were hard to break. But Ria's forces fought with the desperation of people who had nothing left to lose. Cassia's flanking attack worked. Her warriors hit the left side like a hammer, scattering the newer recruits and creating the chaos Ria needed. The Council's forces tried to regroup, but Ria and Kyle were already driving through their center, their trueborn power carving a path of destruction. Ria lost herself in the battle. Her wolf took over completely, moving on pure instinct. Bite, tear, kill, move. Blood soaked her fur. Bodies fell around her. The world narrowed to the next threat, the next target. She caught glimpses of Kyle beside her, his black wolf massive and unstoppable. Saw Vera fighting with cold precision. Saw warriors from a dozen territories standing together against a common enemy. The tide was turning. Slowly, impossibly, they were winning. Then Ria saw him, a figure standing at the back of the Council's forces, watching the battle with cold calculation. Even from a distance, she recognized the authority in his stance, the way others deferred to him. One of the five. He was directing the armies, adjusting tactics in real time. As long as he was coordinating them, the Council's forces would keep adapting, keep pressing. They needed to cut off the head. Ria made a decision. She broke from the main fight and charged directly at the Council member. Weaving through combatants with reckless speed, warriors tried to stop her. She tore through them without slowing. Behind her, she heard Kale roar through the pack link. "Ria, what are you doing? Ending this!" The Council member saw her coming and shifted, a massive brown wolf with scars covering his muzzle. Old, experienced, powerful, but not as powerful as her. They collided with bone-shattering force, and Ria felt ribs crack. His, not hers. They rolled, snapping and clawing, and Ria's size advantage became clear. She was stronger, faster, and absolutely furious. She pinned him, jaws closing around his throat. "Call them off," she snarled through the link, making sure every wolf in range could hear. "Call off your armies, or I tear your throat out right now." The brown wolf went still beneath her. Around them, the fighting began to slow as warriors realized what was happening. "You can't win this," Ria continued. "Even if you kill me, the territories are united now. They won't bow to you anymore. This ends here, either with your surrender or your death. Choose." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the brown wolf shifted back to human form, an older man with gray hair and cold eyes that still held a spark of defiance. "You think killing me stops anything? The others will face the same choice you're facing now. Submit or die." Ria shifted as well, though she kept her claws pressed against his throat. "The Council of Five is finished. Your time is over. Accept it." The man's eyes darted around, taking in the battlefield. His forces were losing ground, surrounded on multiple sides. The alphas who'd pledged to Ria were coordinating perfectly, fighting like they'd trained together for years instead of hours. He'd lost, and he knew it. "Stand down!" he called out, his voice carrying across the valley. "All Council forces, stand down!" The order rippled through the ranks. Slowly, reluctantly, the Council's warriors began lowering their weapons. The battle was over. They'd won. Ria stood, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. Around her, warriors were collapsing where they stood, too tired to even celebrate. Kale reached her first, pulling her into his arms despite both of them being covered in blood, and worse. "That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen," he said roughly. "Did it work?" "You just defeated the Council of Five in single combat." "Yes, it worked." Vera appeared, limping slightly but grinning. "Not bad, little sister. Not bad at all." Elder Cassia approached, her scarred face exhausted but satisfied. "What do we do with the prisoners?" Ria looked at the Council members still kneeling on the ground, at the hundreds of warriors who'd followed his orders. She could execute them. Make an example, ensure no one ever challenged her authority again. But that wasn't the kind of leader she wanted to be. "Let them go," she said. "All of them. Send a message to the remaining Council members. Their reign is over. The territories govern themselves now. If they want to challenge that, they know where to find us." "You're showing mercy to people who tried to kill you?" the Council member asked, disbelief clear in his voice. "I'm showing you what real leadership looks like. Learn from it." Ria turned away from him. "Take him to the borders and release him." As warriors dragged the Council member away, the assembled alphas began to gather around Ria. "What happens now?" one of them asked. Ria looked at the faces surrounding her, pack leaders from a dozen territories, warriors who'd risked everything to fight beside her, her sister, who'd finally revealed herself. Now we rebuild. We create a council of equals. Every territory gets a voice, every alpha gets a vote. No more rule by fear. She paused. And we make sure that what happened to my mother, to your families, to all of us, it never happens again. Cassia nodded slowly. A council of equals, I can support that. One by one, the other alphas voiced their agreement. It wasn't perfect. There would be arguments, power struggles, conflicts. But it was a start, a new beginning. As the sun rose over the battlefield, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Ria stood beside Kyle and surveyed the aftermath. They'd lost warriors. The ground was soaked with blood. The cost had been high. But they'd won something more important than a battle. They'd won their freedom. You know this isn't over, right? Kyle said quietly. The remaining council members will regroup. There will be challenges, rebellions, people who don't want change. I know. Ria leaned against him, letting his warmth seep into her bones. But we'll face it together, all of us. Together, he agreed, the way it should be. Vera approached, her expression uncharacteristically soft. Mother would be proud of you, of what you've built here. I didn't do it alone, no. But you were the spark that started the fire. Vera looked out over the assembled territories. I've spent 15 years planning revenge. But watching you today, I realized something. Revenge isn't enough. We need to build something better, something worth protecting. Are you staying? Ria asked. For a while. Someone needs to make sure you don't get yourself killed doing something heroic. Vera smiled. Besides, we have a lot of catching up to do, little sister. The words felt strange, but right. Family. After a lifetime of having none, Ria suddenly had more than she knew what to do with. In the weeks that followed, the new order began to take shape. The Council of Equals convened for the first time, with representatives from every territory gathering to discuss borders, trade agreements, and mutual defense. It was messy, loud, and chaotic, but it was theirs. Ria and Kyle were named the High Pair, leaders of the coalition but not rulers in the old sense. They could guide, advise, mediate, but ultimate authority rested with the collective council. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The former elders who'd been stripped of rank were quietly reinstated after proving themselves through service. Corwin even approached Ria one day, offering a stiff apology for his actions. I was wrong about you, he admitted. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. You were doing what you thought was right, Ria said. I can't fault you for that, just do better next time. He nodded and left, and Ria felt something tight in her chest finally loosen. Not everyone would accept her. Not everyone would like her. But she'd proven that she belonged here, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. One evening, several months after the battle, Ria stood on the tower balcony watching the sunset. The mark on her throat had fully healed, leaving a silver scar that gleamed in the fading light. Cale joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. What are you thinking about? He asked. How different everything is now. How different I am. Do you miss it, the way things were before? Ria considered the question. Did she miss being invisible? Being safe in her insignificance? No, she said finally. It was easier, maybe, but I wasn't really living. I was just surviving. And now? Now I'm living, fighting, building something that matters. She turned in his arms to face him. Now I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. Cale smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made her heart stutter. A queen. Your queen. Mine, he agreed, and kissed her as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Below them, the pack moved through evening routines, warriors training, children playing, families gathering for meals. The sound of laughter drifted up on the wind, mixing with the distant howl of wolves greeting the rising moon. This was what they'd fought for. Not power, not revenge, not even survival. But the chance to build a future where no one was deemed worthless simply for being different, where strength came from within, not from bloodline, where a servant girl thrown into the Blood Basin could rise to become the most powerful leader the territories had ever seen. Ria had been condemned as nothing. She'd become everything. And the story of the girl who refused to die, who turned her execution into her coronation, would be told for generations to come. not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that sometimes the ones society throws away are exactly the ones it needs most. The bond hummed between Ria and Kael, steady and strong and eternal. Together, they'd reshape their world, and they were just getting started.